thank you all for picking to come to the Apparel panel here. We're really excited for you to learn, understand, ask questions, and just learn a little bit more about what the possibilities are within apparel. So for those of you that have never met me, I am Cassandra Ratcliffe, and I am the Shopify Community Manager for both Vancouver and then Sea to Skies, all the way up to Whistler. For those of you that don't know what Shopify is, it is a commerce platform that enable businesses to be able to run and manage their business, whether it's online or even retail. So for those of you who have done any type of shopping online recently, which I'm sure a lot of you have, you would have likely already used Shopify without even knowing it. So yeah, let's get started. So we have 3 incredible women here to talk to you about the apparel business and just to kind of hear about their experience. So why don't we get started? We'll go around, we'll get everyone to just introduce themselves, a little bit about their business, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty about like what inspired you and that sort of thing. So Josephine, why don't you go first?
Sure. Thank you, Cassandra. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Josephine Kwan. I'm the founder of Flow to Freedom Apparel. So I've designed a line of patent-pending leak-proof activewear for the 1 in 3 females that suffer from heavy periods and other dampness issues. And we are locally made here in Vancouver. We're made from sustainable materials. And yeah, so I've been in business. We've launched now for about 1.5 years.
Amazing. Caroline, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Caroline Bertrand, and I'm the founder of a company called Borderline Bodysuits. So these bodysuits are sustainable, local, and finally functional. So if you've ever had to go to the bathroom in a bodysuit, you know that it's no easy feat. So I've invented a way that you can essentially use the washroom in your bodysuit without having to get naked. And so that's a big piece. The bodysuits are also made from recycled water bottles, so the fabric itself is sustainable. And much like Josephine, my bodysuits are also made in Vancouver. We've been in business since November 2018, so just over 1 year now. And full time, I also work with Cassandra at Shopify. So helping businesses run online businesses is really what I love to do.
Amazing. And then Valerie, do you want to finish it off?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie. I am the owner of a very small business called Veespoke, where I differ a little from our other 2 panelists, where I have a focus mostly on accessories. So scarves, which really in Vancouver is basically apparel at this point. And I've been actually running this since 2013, starting off quite small. Everything is made in-house in my Vancouver East Van studio. And yeah, and this year 2020 marked my year of going full time with this.
Congratulations, that's very awesome. Well, let's just get this conversation started. So whoever wants to take this first, and don't feel like you all need to answer it, but I feel like this one you probably will. So what was kind of the biggest push that inspired you to start this business? Whoever wants to jump in.
I can go first. So for me, prior to launching Flow to Freedom, I was in the commercial real estate industry for 13 years. And I got to a stage where I started thinking, what did I want to do in terms of contributing and building a legacy for myself, and helping others make a lot of money was great, but I just wanted to do something to give back. And I've always suffered from heavy periods, and really my passion is for women and girls in sports. 1 in 3 girls currently participating in sport will drop out by late adolescence. And the Canadian Women's Sports Association will say, based on the research, a lot of it is because of accessibility, self-confidence, inclusivity. But for me, I believe a big part of that is periods, because that's exactly what happened to me. When I was 15 years old, I was playing in a volleyball tournament. And at the time, I suffered a period leak on the court. And I ran to my male coach and said I needed to go to the bathroom. And he shamed me in front of everyone and said, no, get back on the court until you're done. Well, from that point on, I never played volleyball again. And I just don't want another girl to ever have to feel and go through that type of trauma. So that's how I ended up thinking about, like, how can I prevent that from happening? And being somebody that loves sports and participating in activity, I couldn't find a solution. So I thought, hey, you know what? If I could develop or design something that was, built-in lining that would give me a peace of mind, then so it was purely out of selfish need, but if I could help somebody, that would be great. So that's how I ended up launching Flow to Freedom.
And honestly, I feel like that is something that a lot of people have actually gone through, maybe not similar situation, but there's obviously a need for it. So that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
I can go next. It's very much on the same vein of kind of being anchored in sports. Growing up, I was a competitive gymnast my whole life. So I spent 6 days out of 7 in bodysuits. And I've always wanted to have my own business because I wanted creative control for every facet of the business. So when I thought of what kind of business do I want to start, I just started looking at what do I know. And that time was really, I've spent 17 years of my life in a gym, and I also know that bodysuits were coming up in fashion as being these pieces that women were really looking for. But there was a problem there, which is going to the bathroom in a bodysuit is quite painful. You have to either take it fully off, or you're squatting over the toilet completely naked, or you have to do some sort of contraption to be able to use the bathroom while in your bodysuit. So my bodysuits are both fashionable but also functional, whereas the snap is in the back instead of being at the base, and easily slides down and back over. So that was important to me. But also the second piece was I wanted to start a business, but I didn't want to contribute more to the global warming crisis and the amount of waste that is within fashion. So I sought for a sustainable fabric instead of just a normal fabric, so that I can keep pushing that narrative as well on sustainable fashion. So those are kind of the two things that I can talk about today.
That's awesome. Valerie, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I actually have a different story from our two lovely
Love that.
panelists. So I actually got my start in my business because I was going on maternity leave with my first child. And I had been working in the nonprofit sector for about 6 years at that point. And it was time to really make a decision. Would I continue in a not-for-profit role and also raise my child, or could I do that part-time and do something a little different? Because my focus had been mostly on operations and technology within nonprofit. Like it's exciting, and don't get me wrong, I love logistics and I love statistics and all of those things, but I was looking for something to be a little bit more creative. So it wasn't born out of a need per se, like Caroline and Josephine, but it was more me thinking of something practical that I could create that is useful. So it started off as an infinity scarf. I'm sure everybody has one of those bad boys kicking around, or a few in their closet. And I made them because they were lovely and I really enjoyed them, but I could also use them when I was feeding my child. So it solved a few problems, but it was more because I was looking for a creative outlet, not to do anything big, but just to do something a little bit different with the little bit of extra time I had.
I mean, honestly, I feel like there's a couple different ways of. It's like they have a need that they specifically are looking to be met, and they can't figure that out, and they have an idea and then they run with it. Or it's just like, I want to do something a little bit different. What is that? And then kind of just testing out a few different things and seeing what works. So that's awesome. I love that. So one of my questions is, starting a business just seems like a massive undertaking. So let's go with like kind of the best surprise. What was kind of the best surprise in starting a business that you did not expect? It could be something that, you know, right off the bat was really easy, or maybe just over the past, let's say 9 months, even just with COVID going on. What's been kind of the biggest surprises and best things that have happened?
I can go first. I think the best surprise for me was I originally had these bodysuits marketed for 18 to 28-year-olds. I wasn't going much further in age than that. And you always have an idea of, okay, who is my target demographic? So in my sense, it's female identifying people, maybe skewing on the younger side of age, that are very active. That's what I thought my target market was. And the more that I did pop-up markets or even selling online, you realize that people of all ages are going to love your product, which is really cool. Like, you can have a 75-year-old grandmother of a few show up at your market and say, hey, I really want one of these. Can I try it on? You're like, hell yeah, heck yeah. Like, I would love to see that. So for me, I mean, that's not like a huge money win, but that's just been really interesting to see that although you might have an idea in your head of who is going to buy from you, you could be completely wrong, which can be fun sometimes.
Caroline, especially that it isn't necessarily a money driver. I think that right there just increases your excitement to put more work into your business and get it to more people, which ultimately can make you more money, but it doesn't always need to be the kind of the money aspect, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, and you start realizing use cases. Like, a lot of new moms would buy my bodysuits because they're really soft. And also, you don't realize, but a newborn baby is constantly trying to pull up the mom's shirt so that they can breastfeed. And I had never thought of that, not having children myself, that having a bodysuit that's tucked in, it's not going anywhere, can really help alleviate maybe that little pain point for a new mom. So constantly learn from your customers and what they're using your product for, and it's going to take you way further than you originally thought.
That's awesome. Josephine, Valerie, either of you want to go?
Yeah, I would jump on what Lynn said. Even same for me when it came to customers, like when she talked about new moms and incontinence, leakage. Somehow, like, that became a thing where, you know, I was getting a lot of customers from new moms. But I think what surprised me the most when I started the business was we all, like, you see, especially in the tech world, and you know, you see the unicorns and you see people like building their businesses really quickly. You make the assumption that, you know, you build it and they will come. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of patience. It's a lot of speaking to customers to see if you have the right customers. Like Carolyn said, in the beginning, I tried to serve everyone. And now I'm actually a lot more dedicated because that is my passion, the sports route, and trying to connect with athletes and girls and high school girls, because that's really, like, that's what I relate to, and that's what happened to me. And since I've kind of redirected my focus, I've noticed the energy has changed within the business. So yeah, it's so true. Like, you're constantly learning, and being an entrepreneur, that's the biggest thing. You need to be adaptable, is one of the things I really quickly learned.
And like, on that, Josephine, you build it and you hope that they'll come. Like, the amount of times that I saw someone comment on a meme about having to pee in a bodysuit, and I would literally DM them and say, hey, I have a bodysuit. Like, do you think you would like this? And it feels weird, but you have to hustle, and you have to literally put yourself out there, because things can get lost in the sea of marketing as well. So you don't see that from the entrepreneurs because they don't share it, because it feels kind of gross, but everyone's done it.
Yeah. The term over as well. It usually takes 3 to 5 years to become an overnight success. It's just all the back end work, the hard work that people don't really realize. And then next thing you know, you have an overnight success. That's kind of the thing that happens, is like you're staying up late, you're on the computer late, but you're putting in work that actually you are really passionate about. So it ultimately comes back to being the reason why you do it.
Yeah.
I think for myself, one of the biggest surprises in the length of the business that I've experienced has been actually enjoying some of the things I really disliked at the beginning and kind of switching stuff around. So initially I focused a lot on production because I did most of the production myself for many years, and that was quite a bit. But as my business grew and I had subsequently more children, it was getting harder and harder to do that. And the things that I really disliked doing was working on the business, like finances, sourcing materials, marketing. All of that stuff felt like such a chore to me. But now I feel that things have kind of switched around, where now I've been able to actually get hire staff to help me with production, and I've been able to focus on it. And it's really surprising how much more I'm enjoying this aspect now. I think probably because I don't have to feel the weight of the entire business on me all the time. So it's not a chore, but it's actually quite fun because you can see the fruits of what you're doing when you're working on the business, as opposed to being in the weeds.
I think also, depending on where you started, for you were physically making the products, but as time goes on, you become passionate about other things. So it's very exciting that you've been able to bring people on to do the things that you're not as passionate about, but now you're working on stuff that will actually drive the business a little bit further and not have to worry about that. I have a question for everybody. Was this everyone's first business, or had people tried something previously and this is kind of like second, third, fourth, next thing we know?
For me, it was my first business, and I'll be completely honest, I spent way too much time thinking about it. So it was brewing in my head for 10 years, and then when I pressed launch, it felt extremely daunting because I had spent 10 years in my head of how I was going to become an overnight success, and I was not at all. So a little piece of advice: if you have an idea, just start small. Because you're going to start thinking that you're going to build an empire overnight, and or maybe not, maybe you're a little more rational, but yeah, those things can happen.
Yeah, and the nice thing too, exactly like you said, in terms of just getting started, is just because you start with one idea right now doesn't mean that you're strictly married to it for the rest of your life. Especially right now, with a lot of things being digital and being able to set up a store online and that sort of thing, you could start with one product and say, you know what, that's not for me. I've been selling this and I have a completely different market demographic than I thought, and be able to switch. So exactly like Caroline said, if you have an idea, just try to start it. Start small. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, see, is it something that they would like? And then go from there.
Yeah.
Realistically,
Reddit,
yeah.
Start some threads on Reddit, on Quora. See like, hey, would you mind giving me your email address? Because I'm thinking of launching this thing. Would you be interested? And you'll be so surprised to see how many people want to see your journey.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love that. And did anybody else have any businesses prior? I know, Josephine, you were saying you were in a completely different space previously.
Yeah, well, I was in commercial real estate, but I've had my consulting business for quite a few years, but that's totally different because it's service-based. Like, the difference between creating a product is a whole different animal. I mean, I would love to have a conversation with the ladies about even just sourcing materials, and it's just totally not what I thought it was going to be. Like, when a lot of businesses, for example, say go to Asia and they're looking to create a product, you go and get a quote. Your quote contains everything. It's a finished product with your labeling and your hand tags. Here it's like I have 4 layers in my pants, so every layer comes from a different country. I'm hand doing my hand tags. Like, labels are coming from different countries. It's really a logistical nightmare, but I had no idea. I'm not sure if it was the same for you guys, you ladies.
I started off really small, I just sourced everything locally, and it's only been with the last three years that I've actually started really properly sourcing my stuff. And there's still a lot of things that I am doing that you were talking about, like putting stuff together by hand. Like, it wasn't that many years ago that I stopped hand stamping my tags. And when I stopped doing that, it was honestly one of the greatest things that I could have done. But it's not until you kind of get to that next step, and then the hindsight, you're like, right, I see why this is done. And a lot of it was learned from talking to other people. I'm like, oh, what should I do for this? Oh, that's a great idea. I'll implement that now. And it just took a little bit of time.
Yeah, and like
Leaning on people around you and people who have done it, get their tricks and trades of everything.
just be humble about it. Like I knew nothing about production. I spent a few years working at Lululemon, and I tried meeting as many people as I could, but I've always been on the digital end of things. So when I went to find a fabric supplier out in Langley, I just booked a meeting with the president, and I was like, hey, listen, like this is what I'm thinking of doing, but I want to lean on your expertise. Why don't you tell me what you think would work? And we worked in a partnership that way, and it was super humbling for me. And people are like, what kind of stitch do you want? And this, whatever, weight of the fabric. And I was like, I don't know, this feels nice. Just like be okay with it. It's going to be such a fun journey. That's part of it. You're not going to get it right every single time.
And you're never gonna know what you don't know, right? May as well lean into it, ask those questions, and then really understand what's going on. Because I know personally asking for help is something I do not like doing, but when I do, it is so much better. And I probably save hours upon hours of me Googling what kind of stitch would I like to have on my bodysuit. Probably not going to help me.
Absolutely.
And I think another thing is, this is the perfect scenario where it's also about assumptions, right? Like we were all probably doing it and thinking we were the only ones, and here we're sitting, 3 people are saying the exact same thing. We all went through the same thing. And if you had, if you have been able to create a network and surround yourself, then you can ask those questions. I think for me, I didn't have that network. I came from a completely different industry. I didn't even know where to start. And I'm not sure if it was the same, but when I went to Google, there wasn't a whole lot of information on like, who can I find to make a prototype for me? Like, how do I even source? And you hear all the time, like all these big name brands like Aritzia, Lululemon, Arc'teryx, they all started from Vancouver. So there must be a wealth of labor and companies that can help you. But when you actually go and look, it's all like connections. If you don't have the connections, then it's actually really hard to go and Google to find out who to use. And it's all like, you need a recommendation.
Communities being probably one of my top takeaways from the past few years is just talk to people. You never know who you're going to meet. And you could go pretty far depending on who you meet, which is pretty exciting. Okay, so we've kind of talked about biggest surprises. We kind of touched on kind of biggest challenges just throughout this conversation, but has there been anything that stuck out in terms of like something when you started your business, you did not think it was going to be a problem at all, but it ended up being a kind of a larger challenge than you expected?
Start with this one. Given like the way that I started very small. Like I started on Etsy, and I made everything myself, and I wanted everything to be handmade and hand stamped. And that held me back for a couple years when I realized, I'm like, no, if I want to build something or build a brand or build just confidence in my product, I'm gonna have to move away from this initial idea and really focus on what was a hobby business to make it into an actual business. So the transition between those two types of thinking was a little bit challenging. It was completely worth it. And with the help of like people in my community who are also going through similar transitions in their business, it made it really positive and possible. But that was definitely a challenge, going through my business or through the lifespan of my business.
It's funny how you position it as a challenge, because you can also see it as very exciting as well, in terms of you've gotten to the point that you can, and you need to get to the point that you're not hand stamping everything. So in your mind, you're like, okay, this is actually growing. This is, there's like, you validated that your business is growing. And so, but it's the little things that you kind of get stuck to, right? And so you're like, this is a handmade product. I really want to continue that way. But if it's not sustainable and you want to grow your business, you do have to make those decisions. So I love that it was a challenge, but also very exciting for you to be able to kind of transition.
Mostly a challenge because all the stuff on this side was completely unknown. So I was afraid. I was afraid of all the new things that were going to be coming and all the new challenges. And I'm like, oh, will I be able to handle this? Will I still have my same audience? Like, what was that going to be like? But I leapt, and it was okay. I didn't drown on the other side. So it was.
Love that.
For me, what was very surprising and also biggest challenge is I came from a marketing background, and it still felt like impossible to even make a sale. I'm also quite cost effective. I don't like to spend money if it doesn't make sense. So buying Instagram ads, buying Facebook ads for $5,000-$10,000 wasn't even a thought of mine. I just wanted to make everything what's called organic growth. So people finding out about you and purchasing. You could spend hours on creating an Instagram asset, and no one watches it, no one really cares. Or you could spend 2 seconds and you make an Instagram story and it blows up. You'll never know what is going to work and what's not going to work. So for me, the biggest challenge was not putting so much pressure on myself on everything that I was putting out from a marketing perspective, because it's going to be a million little things that are going to get you there. It's not going to be that one big thing that you think is going to make or break your business. So that was a big challenge for me, and still to this day, I hate posting on Instagram. So I need to just be a lot smarter with how I engage with my community, and I bring people into the story of what my bodysuits are, without it like being taxing on me mentally as well.
Totally feel you on that one, Carolyn. I think I never realized how much education I needed in terms of my product. There's so much education behind the product, because people don't understand, well, what do you mean? How does it hold at least 2 to 3 tampons worth of liquid? How does that work? And I've had somebody say to me, well, that's just strange technology. I'm like, but is it? Like, it doesn't, like, I just, and because I know it works, how do you build that trust so that somebody understand that it does work? So the ads, like, I know what Carolyn's saying, you can post as many ads as you want, but I think a lot of times and another thing is people constantly talking about the love for sustainability. We all want it, but when it comes down to it, there's a cost attached to that. Are people actually prepared to pay the cost difference? And in addition to sustainable, to produce locally is a whole different ball game in terms of cost as well. Like, I think those few things were really big, rude awakening for me. Like Carolyn, I did a bunch of pop-ups, and if I got to speak to people directly and explain the story and explain how it's used and what happens, and people can touch and feel, they were a lot more engaging and trusting to like try or buy the product. But when it's purely online, I think it's a lot harder.
Yeah, and to that point, like, it's taxing as well, and people are like, why is this so expensive? Like, why? And separating yourself from your business is going to be a huge lesson to learn, because it's like, well, these are made locally in Canada, which is 10 times more expensive than making it in Asia easily. Plus, they're made from a sustainable fabric. So you feel like you're constantly having to fight for your business, which is awesome, but it can be taxing from an education standpoint for sure. So just like know the facts. And on the flip side, there are people that know the facts, and those are your people. They're going to go to bat for you. They're going to be so stoked about your product. So don't get too bogged down by people that might not understand what you're doing, because they might not be your people, and that's okay.
Yeah, and just speaking to that too, that's really when it comes back to like, figure out your target market. Who are you speaking to? What is your marketing speaking to? How are you getting to them? Exactly like you said, there are going to be people that are like, oh, well, I could get a product like this for, way cheaper, but it's not with the same values that it comes with it, right? So just trying to figure out, how do you position yourself in front of the right people is so important. And for anybody who hasn't seen Caroline's Instagrams, there's one specific one that I absolutely love, and it is so good. Just feel like not a lot of people have been able to see it. So the work really works, but I could see like you kind of want to have that overnight success, and it's just trying to get it in front of the right people. But sometimes building it over time also helps you. I imagine being an overnight success, real pain logistically if you're hand making everything, and the next thing you know, you have 1,000 orders, and you're like, well, can't make those today. So I mean, this is a big topic, especially over the past year, but I would say kind of, the next kind of question is like, how has COVID impacted everyone? I know for the majority of you, you're all online, so that kind of gives you a little bit of a cushion, I would say, but how has it impacted your business and even just yourself? How have you been managing everything?
I'll field this one first. So I decided to quit my job of 14 years, ending Feb 29. I was part-time doing just technology management at a local charity, and I thought, you know what, this is the year that I am going to focus on my business. I also concurrently run a business where I put on craft shows, like local ones, and I do at least 2 of them a year. And March came around, and it looked like I wasn't going to be in any craft shows. I wasn't going to be putting on any craft shows. And I was just like, okay, let's keep pumping out scarves and we'll just see how things go. But what ended up happening was a friend of mine asked me to make them a mask because I sew. I had a bunch of people, just because they knew that I knew how to sew, they'll either ask me to hem their pants or make them something random. And so I'm like, yeah, I got some time. Kids are home. Why not? I'll make a mask. So about 5,000 masks later, I realized that, okay, there was other opportunities for me this year. It started off small, and then it was an avalanche starting in April, and it was nothing that I have ever intended. It started because somebody had asked me, and I'm like, okay, I will do that. And as time progressed, I improved my product. I had help. I have help probably 15 to 20 hours a week since about September, which is helpful because I'm now expecting my 3rd child, and that all on top of each other with having like production and kids that were at home to homeschool. It was quite a bit. So that it was incredible in a time where I thought it was the worst time to quit my job. So it worked out. But yeah.
I think there are multiple congratulations to be had here. Lots going on. Yeah, congratulations on the new arrival of a child and thousands of products that you didn't even have in the thought process moving into that. Congratulations. That's amazing. I love that.
It was a surprise, and it wasn't really intended. Somebody asked and I said, okay. And then more people asked and then more. And I'm like, okay, I need to do this properly. And I'd been on Shopify since, what year is it? I've been on there for several years now, and it got to the point where I'm like, I can't keep selling these individually. I had to do it properly, make sure it's priced appropriately, get it online and do it right, collect all the taxes that I need to do, and just make it as a part of my business. So that's what I did.
That's awesome. I feel like there was so many different pivots that happened, especially in March. I know for myself, our team was actually an in-person team, and we were hired to run in-person events. And so same thing. March came around and everyone was like, no events. And we just figured it out. So we do a lot of these, which is fantastic. It breaks down a lot of the location barriers. Same thing that kind of the online store does, which has been a huge blessing and something that we didn't really think of. I think a lot of us were very married to the in-person events. Like that's why we were hired and that's what we wanted to do. So I think it has opened up a lot of doors and our eyes into things that maybe we wouldn't have thought of before, especially like masks like yourself.
Yeah, kind of on the other side of that, how this has affected me is that my factory in Vancouver went to only producing masks. So you're trying to get an order through with maybe some new colors or some restocks, and that's just not going to happen. So that's been an interesting one for me too during COVID. The biggest one was I took a pause all of 2020. I said, I want to focus my attention on supporting my entrepreneurs that have like quit their full-time job for this to be their full-time job, because I do have my own full-time job. I wanted people to support their businesses. So kind of along the lens of Cassandra, I did some like webinars. I sent a bunch of messages and I was like, hey, I work for Shopify. Anyone who's struggling right now to get their businesses online, just let me know. And I didn't charge for it. But if I wanted to start a consulting business, like now I have a dozen people that I could probably reach out to and say, hey, did you enjoy that session? Do you maybe you want to chat again sometime, and I can make that a business. So that piece. But what worked for me was in 2019, I hustled so much that my online presence and my Instagram and all of that looked pretty sharp, so that I still had a constant influx of orders throughout the year without doing anything to push for it. So for me, that felt really good, because that meant that my hard work had paid off. Even though it was just a few orders a month, that felt nice for me. So that's kind of the impact of COVID on my business.
Just that's a testament that, yeah, your hard work has worked, and that you can take a step back and having an online presence, it kind of just like continues to grow. It's a little bit of like that snowball effect of like, you put it out there, you put the effort into it, and it continues to grow. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I love that you also kind of pivoted and started helping other merchants, because I know that a lot of people were kind of up in arms trying to be like, what the heck are we doing?
Absolutely. It's scary. And a lot of people just asked me about search engine optimization, which is how do I show up on Google? And there were a lot of quick tips that people could learn in just getting their website in order. So it wasn't too difficult for me. And if it helped other people, then happy to do it.
Mm-hmm. It really did. It really did.
I think also just like there was a lot of businesses that were retail specific and had been thinking about, hey, is this the time for me to go online? But I don't have time. I don't, it just seems like a huge feat to just get up there. And then April hit and it was just like, okay, I need to do this. And it was just an avenue for people, for their customers to continue to support. I think through all of this, a lot of us have found that everyone is willing to support local. They would much rather put their money locally, so that when things reopen, that their favorite businesses are still there. So really kind of like, I saw a lot of our merchants were really focusing on the local like position themselves marketing just in terms of like, we are local and we're a small company, and it really, really did help them.
And the last point I'll point there is that, when you have a friend that has a business and they're local, you want to see them succeed. So you speak out more. So the more people that have local businesses in their circles, the more people are going to want to support locally, because they're going to have the insights that these products can be purchased locally. So that in and of itself is the snowball effect that you're talking about, Cass.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn, I feel like we live parallel lives. Good old COVID. So with COVID, it's funny, March 1st, I started selling at the UBC bookstore and started doing decently well. And then COVID hit and they shut down the school. So that part wasn't so great. But because of COVID, I'm not sure if you've all kind of experienced the same thing, but everyone's online and everyone's a lot more open to connecting online. So I've been able to creep and reach out to some people and make some really good connections right now in the UK. I connected with a big physiologist that she was the one that co-created an app called Fitter Woman that monitors menstrual cycles, and she was the one that worked with the US national soccer team. And they basically said one of the reasons why they won the World Cup in 2019 was because they started tracking their cycles. So it's kind of snowballed into a different kind of opportunity. And now I'm speaking with a big team out of the UK, a football team out of the UK. So that's changed for me. And like Carolyn, like at the time for me, I came from a different industry, so I didn't know a whole lot of people within the apparel or startup space. So I've taken on now I'm also a program manager for Spring Activator. So I also run a acceleration program, and now I'm really involved with a big network of entrepreneurs. And again, right now in my program, I have 13 entrepreneurs from around the world looking to immigrate and scale their business here in Canada. So just immersing myself within the community and staying connected with each other, like that's what COVID's been able to do. And it, at the end of the day, I think it's all perception, right? Like when there's bad, there's usually also opportunity. It's just how you make of it and how you chase the opportunity. Like how Valerie suddenly thousands of orders of masks, who would have thought, right? But you just, you take what it is and you leverage the opportunities, because there will always be opportunities when there are downturns.
I love that you kind of touch on the fact that people are a little bit more open to meeting virtually. Right there, I think opens up a ton of doors. So I feel like a lot of people that were trying to grow or scale businesses or are trying to, ask people questions, it was like, hey, can I set up a meeting? And you would go across town an hour there, and then you'd be with them for 15 minutes. And now you're actually able to meet and talk with people a lot easier, and you have access to a lot more people. So we have minutes left. I have 2 more questions, a little bit more in regards to like the inspiration part. So we have, high school students that are watching us right now. And let's say if you were to meet, one day, hopefully we'll do this in person and it will be a great conversation, but for now it will be virtually. But for anyone that's thinking of getting into the apparel business, what are kind of the top tips that you would give them? I think, Caroline, you made a great point earlier in terms of like, just start, get ready, don't think about it too much. But is there anything else that, if you could give them one tip, what would it be?
Patience. Like, first of all, like Caroline, get started, because don't try to be a perfectionist, because that's how a lot of people paralyze themselves. They don't get started, but get started and be able to adapt, because that's what running a business is all about. But when you do get started, you just need to be patient, because we all think we might be the exception, but like you said, if you really want to build a brand, it will take you at least 3 to 5 years. So that would be my advice.
For myself, I would say ask for help. You do not know everything. You will not know everything. And there's a lot of people who know so much more than you. So humble yourself and ask for help in the areas that you need it. Like finance, like really honing down my margins and that type of thing was something I needed help with. Thankfully, I have my partner, my husband is an entrepreneur, and that's the way his brain works. So I was able to really pick at his brain for that. But there's a lot of really knowledgeable people that you can ask for help from. And really, if they're also an entrepreneur, they will gladly help you too, because they know where you've been.
And like, you have to stay patient, you have to be very flexible, but there are some things that you can put your foot down for. So when things start getting expensive, of course I looked at what it would be like if I produced in Asia. But at the end of the day, the core of my business is produce locally, produce sustainably, and I want to contribute to the economy of Canada. And that's just kind of how I felt. So that's the core of my story, and that's the core of something I'm not willing to change. So know what your non-negotiables are, and then everything else can be very fluid.
More.
Yeah.
If I could choose to do it again and start all over, I would really think about like joining an incubator or accelerator. I didn't know what those were before. And especially if you're in a cohort and you're starting with a group of people that are all doing it at the same time, and you suddenly have this resource and network of people that you can kind of lean on and be accountable for. I mean, we're the best examples. The three of us have pretty much gone through the same things, but on our own. Imagine if we were doing it all at the same time together, and the things we would have learned and how much quicker we would have learned. Don't be I don't want to say naive or stubborn, but learn from other people. Why make the mistake if somebody already made a mistake and learn from it? Learn from them. So that would be my other tip.
Yeah, I mean, before you have an apartment or a mortgage, or like you have to pay for actual things, try to stay with mom and dad for a couple extra years. And I know so many businesses that started off in people's basements. Yeah, they didn't have much money to go out with friends, maybe in their early 20s, but now they've got full flourishing businesses because they were able to cut costs where other people might not have been able to.
Out of something else.
I love this.
I don't know. It's like all these things that I wish I knew. It's okay to grow slowly. It's okay. Like I grew very slowly. It's been 8 years now, because that's how old my eldest son is. So it's been 8 years in this business, and you can grow it as quickly or as slowly as you want. And you don't have to feel pressure to make it the overnight success. You can do it as it works. You can do it as you're doing a full-time job as well. And then maybe you'll get to leap and ditch the full-time job, or you're going to still do contract work. Like there's going to be a lot of different ways that you can do it, but don't feel pressured to go fast.
Speaking on that, like, don't feel like there's one path that fits all. I know, especially in high school, there's a lot of pressure to do, step 1, step 2, step 3, and away you go. But exactly like Valerie said, don't be afraid to, take that full-time job and be doing that on the side. Like a lot of people do that, just a lot of people don't talk about it. It's just not as well known. So don't be afraid to kind of, make your own course, really.
Yeah. And like, if this makes you feel better, like sometimes it feels like everyone's watching you, but at the end of the day, they're kind of not. So don't be scared to make mistakes and to try things out, because yeah, there might be people watching you, but they're going to be your customer out in Norway that really enjoys what you're doing and wants to follow along. The world is a really massive place, so sometimes it might feel like you have all your friends or people at school or whatever that are like criticizing and looking at what you're doing. They don't actually care. So that's been a really big one for me too. Just do what feels good for you. You will find your people, and it's going to be, and just have fun with it. If it's no longer fun, then don't do it. Just keep that in mind too.
Realistically, the people that are criticizing are the people that actually want to be doing what you're doing, and they are envying you. So take that as a form of flattery as well. A lot of people, I feel like a lot of people have a lot going on, and if you slip up a little, like in a little spot, probably won't be noticed. And if it is, we're all human. It's fine.
No publicity is bad publicity.
Yeah,
We'll be talking about you, so
yeah,
keep laughing now.
Get the name out there. Cool. I had two things. One, Valerie, you kind of pointed out in terms of like, don't be afraid to like skew your course a little bit. Funny little background story. Caroline, you already know this one, but the founder of Shopify, the reason they started Shopify is because he actually wanted to sell snowboards online. And he started building out this website, and it didn't work. And he was like, there's no platform that I can go and easily do this. And so he pivoted and said, you know what, I'm actually going to build a platform so that people can do this. And now it's a huge success. And now we're powering a ton of entrepreneurs around the world. So don't be afraid that if you have one thing in mind, that it starts to take you a different way and it makes you happy, like Caroline said, if it's fun, it makes you happy, test it out. I think there's no shame in changing your ideas, and especially, within your teenage years and your 20s, things change all the time. So just kind of stick with your gut and kind of go with that. So I have one more question. We have about 5 minutes, but I feel like we could probably talk for hours, so I will have to stop us at the 5-minute mark. But it kind of goes with the last question in terms of tips and tricks. But so we've inspired these high school students to go out and give it a shot. If they were going out in the world, what are some of the tools and the resources that have really helped you start your business, and maybe tools and resources that you haven't actually used, but that you think would be really useful? Just a little bit of like tangible for the end of this here.
I can start. So from a marketing perspective, there's tons of stuff that you can use that's free, and try to automate as much stuff as possible. So an app like later.com, you can post your entire calendar for your posts for the week, so that you could do that maybe on Sundays, so that you're not constantly trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to post today? What am I going to post today? Another piece is Canva. Canva is really great for creating web assets in high quality. So that's a good one. One thing I did was I went to community college classes, like community center classes, because they're typically put on by professors that go to Emily Carr and are like extremely highly renowned, and they just go to community centers to teach you how to use your new camera, or even how to do photography with your iPhone. And those courses can run pretty cheap, like maybe $200 for 8 weeks. And then you have a new skill that you've created for yourself. So look around your community as well for the different things that you can level up in. But from a digital marketing perspective, get those things started and get your storytelling underway in a way that's quite cheap and easy to use. That's kind of where I would start from a marketing perspective.
Awesome. And there's so many free resources out there that honestly, even if you were like, I'm going to plug Shopify in here because I think they have a fantastic resource section, but Shopify Compass has a ton of really good video content that's just courses. It's all free, super easy to use, and a ton of other platforms do it too. So just leverage that stuff. Don't feel like you need to pay a bunch of money for it either.
Yeah.
I plug Shopify all the time.
You're doing your job for us.
Well, I just ran a session on Tuesday about like our entrepreneurs coming from different countries, like what are the platforms that are good for North America? And you'll have the usual, Wix, Squarespace. And I'm like, if you're e-commerce, or not even just e-commerce, but Shopify is so easy to use. And again, like one of my biggest things, and I've reached out to you, Cassandra, is if you need support, it's so easily readily available. You guys respond really quickly. So I think that's huge. And even just being able to connect to different platforms, whether it be HubSpot or like for the shop, it makes your life so much easier. The other suggestion I would say in terms of, like, I would also say find a mentor if you can, and have somebody that's already done it kind of walk you through it. And again, learning from other people's mistakes. Those would be my tools and suggestions.
Awesome. And Valerie, you have a minute.
If you're starting small, which I started very, very small, like you'll meet a lot of people who are in the same space as you at like local craft fairs or that type of thing. And I've already touched on it, but finding like a community of people that are doing similar things, you can rely on each other, pool your resources together, and just help each other grow. I found and don't be afraid to ask that vendor over there who looks like they have it all together. Ask them, how did you do that? What did you go about it? Because they were in the same boat as you. So most people in this space will be happy to help. And and I'll touch on again on the mentor thing. That's huge because they can just really guide you through it. Oh, hi, Viv.
Hi.
I think our time's up now.
Sorry, I don't mean to rush you.
That's okay. You cut me off at the right time.
Perfect. Look at that. This is why we're friends. All right. Well, yeah, thank you, Cassandra, obviously, for being such an awesome moderator. You're amazing. And to our lovely panelists, Josephine, Caroline, and Val, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights to our youth entrepreneurs and all of our students. You may get a few LinkedIn connections after this because they are learning to network. So thanks again for that. I don't want to take up all of your time. I know you guys are all very, very busy people. But for those that do want to stick around, we are heading over to the main stage for our closing keynote with Charles Chang. So we'll see everyone over there.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.